Hey geometry students, this lesson is for your work on a remote day. We're going to talk about quadrilaterals and how we can tell that that quadrilateral is definitely a parallelogram. I know oftentimes we're going to see a diagram and it's going to look like a parallelogram. We want to know how we can say for certain that it is. So I'm going to make this video. Feel free to pause it as you go, take some notes, maybe draw some of these on your own. You are going to want to have out the organizing paper that I gave you in class where we were checking off which shape had which characteristic. We're going to go to the back of that and see what we can fill in there. All right, here we are on the back, and you can feel free to pause this video and copy this all down right now. I'm not going to scroll down to the bottom two though at the moment. I am going to post this key online to the Google Classroom so you can pull that document up and copy that all down separately if you want to. If you want to take a moment and get what we have written here, that'd be fine. I'm going to reference this, so you want to have this out with you while you're watching this video. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch some parallelograms, and I am going to show you what would be marked in the diagram, what would be shown there, to give you the hint or give you the information that you need to say that it is definitely a parallelogram. And every situation is going to be a little bit different, so you have to read into it just a bit. Okay? But first I'm going to draw my quadrilateral, and I will excuse myself because I'm not an awesome artist, but I've drawn a lot of parallelograms in my life, and I'd say that that fits pretty close to what a parallelogram looks like. Okay? So I see this, I say it looks like a parallelogram, but how do I know for sure? We have 6 different ways that we can know for sure. Okay? The first is that opposite sides are congruent. And what that means is that I have sides across from each other that I know are congruent. So these two sides, both marked once, are congruent to each other. And these two sides, both marked twice, are also congruent to one another. Right? And this would be opposite sides congruent. Okay? Now, you're going to be asked to write that out in sentences. You're going to use the full word. You don't need a period there. Okay? But that is the part of the diagram that would tell us. You might also see numbers written here. And if the numbers are the same, that would also cue you in that those opposite sides are congruent to one another. All right, this next one says consecutive angles are supplementary. So again, I've got my parallelogram here, and this is one that tends to get people stuck the most. In order to say that angles are supplementary, remember they have to add up to 180. So I'm going to keep mine nice and simple here. If this angle is 150 degrees, and this angle is 30 degrees, that's what we're talking about here. Right? Consecutive angles, one after another as I work my way around the drawing. And 150 plus 30 add up to 180 degrees. That's what we mean by supplementary. Now, the tough part is if this is all I know, then I don't know enough about these sides, or these angles, I'm sorry. Okay? So I also need to know at least one more of these. I would at least need to know that that's 150, so that I could also tell you that these consecutive sides were supplementary. And I'm sorry, I keep saying sides there. These consecutive angles are supplementary. These consecutive angles are supplementary. Now, I wouldn't necessarily have to know this fourth angle, but all 4 angles of a quadrilateral have to add up to 360 degrees. So if I have 150, 150, and 30, and I add those together, 0, that's 13, carry the 1, it's 330 degrees, and 360 minus 330 equals 30. So I can know for sure that that angle is 30 degrees, and then supplementary angles. So all the way around the diagram, I see the supplementary angles. Okay? And that's what we mean by consecutive angles are supplementary. I would write that like this. Consecutive angles supplementary. That's how I would abbreviate it. You're going to write that out in a full sentence for me here in a little bit. Now, number 3 here is that opposite angles are congruent. We sort of saw that in the last one where we saw 150 and 150 across from each other being congruent. saw 30 and 30 across from each other being congruent. That's what we mean by opposite angles. But generally, we just mark the angles with our congruent signs if we don't know the angles themselves. So if I see this, I know that those opposite angles are congruent. But that's not enough. In order to know that this is a parallelogram, I have to know that both pairs of opposite angles are congruent to one another. Okay? Opposite angles congruent. It has to be both pairs. That's the key here. It's not enough to just be one or the other. Okay? This pair here, those are both congruent. For number 4, I thought I'd switch up the direction my parallelogram was pointing. This next one says the diagonals bisect each other. So in order to know that, I would absolutely have to have my diagonals drawn. Diagonals connect to the opposite angles, so you would have to see those in your diagram. And what that means, bisect means to cut in half. So this diagonal cuts this one in half, and this diagonal cuts this one in half. The most common way you're going to see that is by congruent markers on either side. That means these two segments are congruent, which makes it a bisector, and these two segments are congruent, which makes it a bisector. Now, you want to be careful here. If all you see is that one diagonal is bisected, and you don't know anything about this other, that's not enough information. You have to know something else about this diagonal, and that's where those come in. So it's both diagonals bisect each other. There's really not a great shortcut for there. Diagonals bisect each other. Okay. Now, back at the beginning in step number 1, we saw that opposite sides were congruent. Now we're going to say that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. And it's going to work in a very similar way. You just have to see the parallel markings. Remember, parallel markings are these arrows drawn on the lines, sorry. But just having one pair parallel is not enough information. We also need to know that the other pair is parallel. Okay, so this would be opposite sides are parallel. That's our symbol for parallel. Okay? But you have to know both pairs. Okay? These two across from each other, these two across from each other. All right. Then our last one here is actually my favorite. I don't know why I have a favorite, but I do. Okay? And the nice thing about this side is you only have to know about one pair of sides, but now you need to know two things about them. So if I know that this pair of sides is congruent, that wasn't enough. I would have also needed to know that this side of, or this pair of sides was congruent. Okay? Likewise, if I knew that this side was parallel, that wasn't enough. I would have needed to know that this pair of sides was parallel. But here's the cool thing. If I know both of those things, congruent and parallel, about that pair, that's enough. Okay? If I know that one pair of opposite sides are congruent and I'm going to emphasize and there, and parallel, that's enough information. I don't need to know anything about either of those two sides. As long as I know that this pair has both of those things going for it, congruent and parallel. All right, so here they are again. Opposite sides are congruent, both pairs. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Opposite angles are congruent, both pairs. Diagonals bisect each other. Opposite sides are parallel, both pairs. And then this one pair of opposite sides, congruent and parallel. What you're going to do is go over to this assignment that's being shared with you. Okay. It's called Parallelogram Writing. And each of these figures on the first page is a parallelogram. I'm telling you that. What you're going to tell me is how you know and which of those reasons. And you're going to write that out in a full sentence. I've even started the sentence for you. It probably shouldn't take you 4 lines. Okay. You can type that right in here. You'll have your own copy and just share it back with me. As I scroll down on the second page, what I'm telling you is that you don't have enough information in this picture. Okay? You have some of the information, but not enough. It might be a parallelogram, but we don't know for sure. You're going to tell me why it's unknown and what else you might need to know. So do you need to know another pair of angles are congruent? Do you need to know another pair of sides are parallel, etc., etc.? Okay. There are only 4 of those ones. Again, you can type them right in there and submit all of this back to me. Okay. Thanks for watching. Feel free to go back, watch it again, pause, and we'll see you again next time in class.